Good evening, everyone. It's time for our regular governing board meeting for East Valley Institute of Technology. First item on our agenda is call to order and Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Covington has agreed to lead the pledge tonight. You all rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda is presentation recognitions for national and state competition. We have John Howell and Sharon Black are going to present on that. Are they all here?
We have Sharon here, and we have Ms. Paula Corbin that will present as well. I think one of the things that's really important for us to keep in mind is as we start the school year, there's a lot of things that sometimes don't go exactly the way you want them to go.
Of course.
But I think there is a number of success stories that we have daily in our organization, and I think you all are going to hear tonight about some students and some opportunities that are truly exceptional. So I appreciate both Ms. Corbin and Ms. Black to participate tonight. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Paula Corbin, and I took one of my students, Kate Tomorrow, to Washington, D.C. this summer for Educators Rising. She qualified in state. She got third in state in lesson plan and design with an emphasis in civics. So she designed, implemented, videotaped herself, wrote a lesson plan for third graders. And then in DC, she presented the same thing, and she got third in the country, competing against 85 other students. So it was a really big deal for us. So, and I only took one student, and we placed, so it made us look really good.
That student
fantastic.
wasn't able to participate tonight, or?
She's actually, she's a great student, so she's 16 years old. She graduated early from Fountain Hills High School, and she's going to NAU next year. So she's actually up there getting ready to go to NAU.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Sharon Black, and I'm going to present on the rest of the CTSOs. For FCCLA, which is Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America. They had a national conference in San Diego, and we had students in fashion design and merchandising programs that won 2 gold medals. Brianna Genter won gold in event management, and the team of Gianna Brinzing, Daniela Velasquez, and Kara Schaefer won gold in promote and publicize FCCLA. And then also its skills, which was in Atlanta, Georgia. The EVIT team of Karina Miranda and Caitlin Pecura won a bronze medal in 3D visualization and animation for college, and Lexi West won bronze in cosmetology for the high school division. And then what I know the best about is HOSA, because I've been in charge of HOSA here for the last few years. It was an amazing, we compete internationally now, so they were competing against Japan and China and Mexico, and we brought 20 competitors, and what was really cool was 11 were on the stage for top 10 out of those 20. We were again the top school in the nation for our national service project. I'm very proud of that. We've won, I think, 12 out of the last 14 years for the national award for that. We got our first HOSA Bowl, which is kind of like a quiz bowl. We've been trying to get on stage since we started. Most of the HOSA Bowl teams start in middle school, and we finally got on stage. We got 8th place with the team Jesus Higuero, Nomio Luez, Sabina Martinez, and Kendall Morris. I know they would love to come talk to you. They're going to be seniors this year, and they promised me that they're going to medal, so I'm going to hold them to that. We also, Allison Lumley got a silver medal in medical assistant post-secondary. Angela Palmason got a gold medal in pharmacy science post-secondary. Shelby McKeon got a silver medal in pharmacy science post-secondary. Every student that she brought won, so it was pretty amazing. And then Gian Boggs was awarded gold medal in veterinary science. Ava Crawford, bronze medal in veterinary science. Again, we only took a few, and they killed it, and they came back and said, we're going to do even better next year. So again, our veterinary people are doing a great job. And then we had a young lady that finished in the top 10 in nursing assistant, and then Charles Mann finished in the top 10 in pharmacy science. And we had an EMT team that also finished in the top 25. So we're just going to continue to get better and better and bring you lots more winners. Thank you.
Thank you.
So one of the things that I was so impressed when I heard the results, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Black or Ms. Doolin, I don't believe that correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe that we've placed an adult in post-secondary previously, have we? So here's what I like so much about that. We've talked for about the last 18 months about being one EVIT, where we go from being, high school and adult, and we're trying to marry it together. And when we do that, the success bleeds itself throughout the organization. And so for us to be in a position where we have post-secondary success, high school success, is a really good step in the right direction. And I compliment our sponsors and our teachers for really kind of walking that line of being able to produce not just success in the K-12 or the 11-12, but also post-secondary. So I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to share our success tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Next item is the minutes for a special meeting that was held on July 25th, 2022. I'll entertain a motion in a second.
I'll motion to approve the minutes. I'll second.
Okay. Any corrections, comments, concerns? Hearing none, Mrs. Boggs, can you conduct the vote, please?
Covington?
Aye.
Lane?
Aye.
McAfee? Aye. Luke? Aye. Boggs is an aye, and Hobson?
Aye.
Thank you.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
I'd like to say something to the teachers that just did the presentation there. I was an MPLA advisor and DEC advisor, and I've taken many kids to nationals. Right there in 1 year, you have more that went on the stage that I had. You guys did a very good job, excellent job. You should be proud of yourself and the students. I am. It's neat that we know about it.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you, Mr. Lane.
You bet, no problem. Next item is call to the public. Where members of the public may comment on any matter, except item subject to legal review. Have we had any requests?
No, sir, we have not.
Okay. So,
Consent agenda.
the consent agenda, all items will be considered as a group and will be approved with one motion. There will not be separate discussion of these items unless a board member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered as a separate item. We have our consent agenda will be 6A through I. Have a motion and a second? Or is there anything that needs to be withdrawn for separate discussion?
I'll make a motion for A to I, consecutively vote.
Okay,
I'll second.
all righty. Any questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, Mrs. Boggs, will you conduct a vote, please?
Covington?
Aye.
Lane?
Aye.
McAfee? Aye. Luke? Aye. Boggs is an aye, and Hobson?
Aye.
Thank you. Next item is our personnel agenda, be items A and B. I'll entertain a motion and a second for those.
A motion we do A and B as one.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay, thank you. Any questions, concerns, comments? Okay, having none, Mrs. Boggs?
Covington?
Aye.
Sorry. Covington?
Aye.
Lane?
Aye.
McAfee? Aye. Luke? Aye. Boggs is an aye, and Hobson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, next item is 8. It's an information discussion. We won't be taking action with this, merely discussing. It'd be concerning the EVIT enrollment criteria. Dr. Wilson, you want to take it from here?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the governing board. This is the beginning of what I hope is a regular conversation that we have you as a board and us as administration. There have been a number of times over the past, I think, 6 to 8 months in which we've had conversations about things like program approval, satellite approval, our programs. We've talked previously about the expansion of power. Do we want to expand out of power? And I think all of those conversations are conversations and decisions you all are going to wrestle with, but I think it's important to put them in context. And I think the context begins with looking inward first. As you know, I've said since the time I became the superintendent that I think it's really easy to look outside and point the finger, but I think first we look inside and make sure that we correct what we need to correct internally before we kind of take that next step. And one of the areas that we've worked on correcting over the course of time, and it's a work in progress admittedly, is our admissions process. I think that previously, I think there was a process in place that in many ways disenfranchised or did not include allowing students on our campus that potentially could benefit from us more than no disrespect to our partnering districts, than their home high schools. And so we worked over the last couple of years to try to really reduce that. And I think it's important that we begin sharing that work that we've done with you, so you can better understand kind of where we're at in terms of our enrollment process and what that might mean for us as we move forward, not only in terms of enrollment on our central campuses, but potentially what it might mean as we start looking at the possibility of expansion, or even to a degree program expansion at our satellite campuses. And so I've asked Mr. Casaro to come and talk with you a little bit tonight about our admissions and admissions criteria. He's the operating officer over admissions. So Mr. Casaro, please.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Good evening, governing board members. So I was able to pull some data on our admissions for the last 3 years, and the reason I picked 3 years is because that is when we went to the online admission policy, and that's when we started using InfoSnap. And so that was, or not InfoSnap, yeah, InfoSnap. So that was the easiest way for us to pull. So in 2021, the 2020-21 school year, we denied 146 applicants. This year, it was 67. And of those 67 this year, 29 of those students were simply because they were out of boundaries. We couldn't allow them in. 2 of them were because of age. They were too young to come. And then the other ones were a combination of their GPA and those kind of things. So this year what we did, when we looked at our acceptance and we looked at our application process, one of the things that we did remove was attendance. In the past we looked at attendance. But we decided that that was something that we could remove as an obstacle, because a lot of our students, as we know, we're a school of choice. They choose to come here. They don't necessarily choose to go to their freshman English class. They choose to come here. So we have students who may have some attendance issues at their home school. Those don't follow over to us because they want to come here. So 2.0 GPA is required. They have to have 6 credits towards graduation, and they have to have reached 16 at some point during their first year at EVIT. And then their discipline, we do look at discipline. Discipline is only looked at for the last 12 months. And when we look at discipline, we're basically looking for some sort of trend, a negative trend. If a student makes a mistake, we all do that, we're gonna look at that and we're gonna go ahead and let them come on in. It's something that we would see like a pattern. Those would be a reason that we might deny that student. So again, overall this year, we accepted 98.7 of our applicants. So 1.3, if my math is correct. Those are the students that we did not accept. And again, of those students, 29 of them were simply because they were out of boundaries. We had no choice but to not accept them. Now those students could come to us, but they would have to pay tuition. If a student is not accepted, we allow them to appeal. The appeal process is they write a letter, and in the letter they tell us what it is that they are going to do to rectify the situation that caused them to not be accepted in the first place. So if they're a little short of credits, They tell us that they're going to summer school. If their GPA is a little low, they tell us what they've done to help fix their GPA. Once that appeal comes in, we have an appeal committee, and it's the counselor over the program and the director over the program. And they look at those appeals. And they take into consideration, for instance, let's say a student comes to us with a 1.7 GPA, but they look at their freshman GPA and see that they got a 1.2. You know, they had a hard time adjusting to high school. It could have been because of COVID and online learning, those kind of things. Then they look at their next GPA and they see that their sophomore year, they have a 2 or something like that, or 1.8. So we see that they're trending in the right direction. So those students typically are allowed to come in. And again, like I said, we look at their discipline, and if it's a one-time thing, that's a completely different issue than if we see like a trend. And we also look at what the infraction is, because some students, you know, they'll get suspended because they take their phone out too much, which that to us, that's not going to be an issue with us. So those are the kind of things we look at in the appeal process. So we also we're also working with our sending districts. We do this with our counselors' breakfast to show them that we have changed our process, that we do want to allow even more students. I mean, we're not happy denying 67 students. You know, of course, we would love to allow all of the students to come here, but we also know that there are some sort of requirements that we have to keep. But we want those sending districts to realize that and know that this is the best fit for some of those students. They may not think that, but in the long run, it is the best fit for them to come here. So those are the kind of things we look at in this process. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I do. The outer boundaries, define that, please.
So a student, if they live out of the district boundaries, so if they either A, do not live within our CTED,
Okay.
or, so that would be it. Now, we allow
Do they
homeschool
live in the
students.
boundaries of another CTED, or are they just in one of these little things that's not in a CTED?
Typically, they would be in the boundaries of another CTED. Now, if they live out of our CTED boundaries, but they attend one of our district schools, they're allowed to come here. It would just be for those students who live outside of our CTED boundaries and do not attend one of our public schools, then those students would not be allowed to come here.
So there's 29. Is there a geographical area where there's a lot of those?
Usually in the south part below, in the, like I said,
Pinal
in the southern
County?
part, yeah, Pinal County, those areas. That's where typically they come from, or some will come from the Phoenix.
And
the
that
Phoenix
was
area.
29 students?
29.
Okay. How many total applicants did we have this past year?
So 5,472.
That's for both campuses?
That's for all. Mhm. And we have currently 5,405.
Those 29, were any of those homeschoolers, does that count since they're not technically going to a sending school?
If they
Would
are
they be
homeschooled and
denied?
live outside of our boundary, yes. If they're
Okay.
homeschooled and they live in our
In the
boundary, then
you're
they're good to
fine.
go.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, well, those students are accepted.
Okay.
I have a question. It looks like, if my math is correct, that 36 were denied due to GPA issues.
So 29 were due to GPA, 6 were due it was a class that was full, and we have very few classes that are full because we lifted the caps on the majority of our classes. The only classes that are full is it's purely a space reason. Like for instance, out at Power, our welding bay, we only have 20 welding bays. That was the space that we could provide welding. So, you know, some of those students weren't accepted because we just don't have the room for them. And then one of them some of them are from others, so they might be GPA plus their age wasn't the right thing, so they're kind of broken into 2 categories.
Okay, thank you. So of the 29 that were GPA related, how many of them appealed?
So if that 29, that means they either did not appeal or they appealed and still, you know, for instance, we had students that had a 1.2 GPA. They would have appealed, but then that student still was not accepted. So I don't know the actual numbers of how many of them, of the 29 appealed and didn't get in, but that's, yeah.
Okay. And so one more question. Is there a criteria where the student has to be on track to graduate?
They have to have the 6 credits.
They have to have 6.
credits.
Okay.
coming when they
So they have to
enter
be,
us.
so they do have to be on track?
Yes, yes.
They can't be
No.
lagging?
No, they do not. That was removed from the catalog for this year.
Okay,
They
that
do
was
not
my
have to
question.
be on track to graduate, but they have to have had at least 6 credits. You'd get 6 credits in your freshman year. Most of them come to us as juniors.
Okay,
So they just have to have 6 credits. They don't have to be on track to graduate.
thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Ms. Doolin.
Can you clarify, it has to be 16, is that the first year of the program, or it has to turn 16 before they finish, like
It has to
when?
be 16 at some point in their first year here at EVIT. So if they're in a
Okay.
one-year program, so they can turn 16 the last day of class,
Okay,
and those students are accepted.
okay, thank you.
So I think one of the things that you as a board may have to begin wrestling with is, do we want to adjust this criteria? Because I think in some ways, some of the students that potentially don't have the opportunity to come here, either because of decisions we made or decisions our sending districts are making, would be the exact students that would benefit from being here. And so we can do work on our end, but part of our challenge is to begin working with our sending districts to see that for students that aren't allowed to come here because they're credit deficient, the value of a student in a junior year taking English 9, English 10, and English 11 their junior year because they may not have passed English is not very likely that that student is going to have academic success and complete successfully at their home high school. So how can we begin working with our partnering districts to say, even those students that potentially aren't looking as if they're going to be on track to graduate have the opportunity to come here? And is it feasible, and there's things that we would have to work out here, but is it feasible or even likely that the better pathway for a student that I just described is to come here and get a CTE certification, get a career pathway, as well as a GED, what's called HSE now, and allow them to have a high school equivalency with the industry certification so they have a step out once they leave and have a real opportunity. In order to do that, there's some things that we'd have to get figured out and have to get worked on both with our partnering districts, but also potentially with some of the legislation in order to allow those students to participate. But those are the kinds of things I think that we're going to be coming back to you with for you to wrestle with, because I think that will have an impact on other discussions about what programs do we offer, or where do we build, or do we build, and what's our capacity here to take those students, because all of those are connected together. And I think just the solution of, well, we should deny programs or not deny programs, or expand or not expand, is too isolated. I think you need the context of the whole in order to make an informed decision.
Follow-up question for your comments. On the concept or on the understanding that students, at this point, we removed from our catalog that students do not have to be on track to graduate. Did that simply just get quietly removed, or is that information that we are also sharing with our sending schools?
So we'll absolutely share with our sending school districts. I mean, that's part of what we do with our counselor breakfast that we have with the sending counselors every year. And we always need to do a better job communicating, but I think part of the challenge that we have, and this is part of what we may need some help thinking through, is that there is still a large mindset in our our partnering districts, partly because they get rated on their graduation rate, they get rated on their completion rate, they get rated and marked based on criteria that potentially what we're talking about doesn't necessarily boost them. Now, they get credit for students that earn industry certification, but it's not the same weighted credit towards their label as a student that graduates from high school. So we can open the doors and do better and communicate to those counselors, but it's probably going to take a much larger discussion about what really is in the best interest of students here in the Valley. And for some students, that it may be to come here and get a GED and get a industry certification, and you can still go to college with the GED, right? And so there's pathways there that potentially we can lead into and support more efficiently and effectively than what we have been. But that also means we need some support from our partnering districts to realize we're not trying to go cannibalize students. What we're trying to do is provide opportunities that truly are in the best interest of the student. And maybe we're better positioned to do that than others.
So can I clarify, because this is later on when we talk about applied technologies, are we looking at that type of model where kids come here at 9th and 10th grade to offer some of those GED, but they need 9th grade in order to know if they're going to be on track? So
Right.
Is that part of the discussion, or is that not part of this broader discussion?
So when you say applied technologies, is as a program approval, or as, you mean for like ALA or
Yeah, the way they have it set up, they have the whole high
Gotcha.
school is there, so they're
Gotcha.
teaching, is that part of this discussion? Is that any kind of model? Is there interest in that, or no?
So I think that's a fascinating model, to be truthful. I think at this stage of the game, we, meaning a CTED, can't award a diploma. So we would need a third-party partner to do that diploma awarding. And so I don't know that, from my perspective, I don't think we're there yet. I think I'm more leaning into those students that currently are on a high school campus and maybe aren't going to have success on that high school campus. Can we bring them here, or in partnership with our sending districts, can they service them through an HSE or a GED, but then still have them come here to get that industry certification? It's a little bit like what we talked about with our foster ed, where we said, there's value in having the opportunity to get a high school equivalency, whether it's through a diploma with our partnership with Heritage, or if you've completed high school, come here in our residency and get a CTE certification, so you can have credentialing currency in the market towards a job.
Thank you, I appreciate that, that really clarifies it for me.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about the out of boundaries. Maybe I'm just not informed or something, but my understanding is Arizona, at least for secondary school, and if not all grades, it's open enrollment wherever you'd like to go. So what precludes us from accepting them? Is it that we can't
They're
claim
counted, right?
ADM on them, or?
So nothing precludes us from accepting them, other than we can't capture ADM on them from the state because they don't reside in the CTED in which the taxes are levied for our programming. And if we were to do that, if we were to give them the opportunity without having the ability to have the tuition as an example, then I think one might argue that it's a gift of public funds, that we're giving away a learning opportunity that is free when others are having to pay for it.
What if we were to direct them perhaps to enroll in a member district if they're not enrolled somewhere else already?
We can, and truthfully, part of the discussion that we started last year and will continue this year is that I know in other CTEDs, part of the way that works is, for example, if I'm not going to say the CTED, if there's another CTED that's in the same situation, oftentimes what they'll do is they will enroll in the CTED. I don't want to get this wrong. They will upload and pay the tuition. The CTED of residency will upload and pay the tuition for the student to attend the CTED of interest.
Mm-hmm. And
So-
then they claim the ATM.
And then they pay the tuition for the student, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we pursue that opportunity in some of the CTEDs close to us.
So that's not an unprecedented thing.
It's not an unprecedented, no.
Does
it's
it
not.
really work at the end of the day, or?
The students get the educational opportunity that they deserve, and everything else kind of gets fixed on the back end a bit, is my understanding of it. I mean, dollars are captured and transferred, yes. I know one district in particular, and I can talk to their CFO again to see how that works.
Okay.
The challenge with that, of course, is, again, if I'm a CTED in an area that has a student that is supposed to go to my CTED but doesn't want to, we historically have sometimes been viewed as the CTED that just does, takes from everybody and doesn't give back. And so there's a bit of a sensitivity there, but at the end of the day, we would want to make the decision that's in the best interest of the student. And if they want to attend one of our programs, then hopefully we can have a partnership with the home CTED to make that work financially.
Yeah, and it could be an issue of perhaps that CTED's not prepared to meet their needs.
Could be.
So a good example would be that we offer a program that the other CTED doesn't have, and that they would want to go here in that case.
In that case, or, I can think of another
Or
example. Geographical. I mean, when you look at where the boundaries of the CTEDs are, if you're in a certain area, you're actually closer to us than
Quite
you
a
are
bit
to the
closer.
CTED that the student lives in. So even though they may offer it, it may not be advantageous, or it may not be an opportunity for them to participate.
Okay.
Any other questions? So we're going to keep bringing pieces like this back up, and then by the end of the semester, I think we're going to have a deeper discussion that talks about how are we going to grow as an organization, both Central Campus, what programs are we offering. Here in the near future, Mrs. Doolin's going to talk about our programs and how potentially some of our programs that are 2 years may be more beneficial to be one. I think there will be the discussion at some point that, you know, I've heard the board mention before, and I understand this, about duplication of programs. What does that look like and why? And are we actually duplicating programs that maybe we shouldn't be duplicating? And so what does that mean for us here as we begin to think through how we're going to grow, and then how that impacts our relationship to our sending districts, our relationship to our facilities? So we'll come back to this every single meeting until the end of the semester, and then a deeper discussion before we get into the spring of next year. So unless you have any questions, that's all I have.
I
Mr.
have,
Lane.
just really quick, does EVIT ever meet with the other CTEDs, like quarterly, or like the directors of the CTE programs?
Our
Like-
districts?
Yes.
Yes.
Like how often just for communication, for,
So, yeah, not as often as need be, and it's been hit and miss, I'll be truthful. There were periods of time in which we were always present, and then there were other periods of time in which we've been very negligent in doing that. And so one of
so
our
there's
goals.
not like a meeting set, like a monthly meeting with all the CTE directors and?
I know the CTE directors meet quarterly, I believe, is it quarterly? Do you know, John? The CTE sending directors meet quarterly, and we're invited to those meetings, and it's been hit and miss that we've attended.
Okay, that might help for communication.
Who would attend
Right.
those normally?
So at one point in time, I attended them, and then things got interesting, and so we didn't have anybody attending them. And then things got normal again, and then we had COVID, so there were no meetings. And then we started back again, and last year, it was a combination of, do we remember last year? Yeah, Mr. Fisher and Mr. Casaro last year. Moving forward this next year, on the chart is Mr. Fisher.
So how often do they meet?
Quarterly.
They meet quarterly?
Quarterly.
Okay.
I would like to encourage whoever it is, and if that person can't, let's have someone else. I think we need to do our part there.
Oh, absolutely, think we need to do our part, and absolutely, we always can do better, always, 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 always. I think one of the things, and I'm going to just be honest about this, and people can say it. I think one of the things, though, I think there is a history of EVIT culture in which it was really easy, fair to point to EVIT as being some of the barriers in some of those issues, and I think that's fair.
Which is part of the concern that I had with, if we're not attending their meetings and we're not doing our part with the communication, then we're failing also.
I agree we're failing, but I think receptivity goes both ways. And I think there are times also in which we have leaned into and wanting, and I think at times there then is the desire on the part of some to not want that and then to point the finger back at us.
Oh, okay.
And I think we should point the finger at ourselves first, but at the same time, I think sometimes everybody should have the courage to point the finger back at themselves if it's warranted.
Well, sometimes maybe we should announce it at board meetings that we've invited people to the table, so that at least there's some transparency with that. And then they have to make the decision on whether or not they're gonna come or not.
There's been a lot of water gone under the bridge in the last few years for a number of different reasons. I think we take the high road and the leadership and
Totally agree. Totally agree.
do the right thing.
Totally agree. And I will always agree to that. I just want to make sure that, and I completely agree. I just think I think that we have to take the high road. Others have to be willing to get on the road. And I think that's fair for us to say.
So we'll announce when the next meeting is, right?
Under lead follower, get out of the way. Okay, thank you, Dr. Wilson. Next few things are action items. We spoke about and we tabled at our last meeting. I'd like to propose that we vote them item 9. A through F as a single item. I think we've had a lot of discussion, and I think there's been some clarification on a lot of issues that were brought forth last meeting, and we tabled these for clarification. So I'm proposing that we entertain a motion to approve 9A through F.
Mr. President, I would like to do each of them independently, please.
Okay. Does anyone else have any input to that?
I support Mr. Covington because I think we don't quite have enough information yet to address these as a whole.
Okay. Then I'll entertain a motion for 9A, transportation waiver from J.O. Combs.
Were they going to, oh, excuse me, we got to have a motion.
I'll move that we grant the transportation for, we talked about doing it just for this semester, is that right? Or what are we going for?
So if you have a motion, then
We don't have a motion
okay,
yet. I'm
so the
crafting one motion. I just want to make sure
Yeah,
I'm
so
making
the-
the correct motion.
So their waiver request is for the entire year, and I'd be happy to explain the rationale for that at the time.
My question is, I thought we tabled it so they could come and talk to us.
My understanding was so I could
think
talk to
there
the
would be a person
superintendent.
here.
My understanding was so I could talk to the superintendent. Now, I'd be happy to have them come talk to you, but I thought the
I think
directive
it
was
was
for
just
me.
clarification, however we
Yes.
got it.
So-
However we got it is what we asked.
So that we can have a discussion, I will make a motion that we approve the transportation waiver request from J.O. Combs Public Schools.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so if I misunderstood, I apologize. I thought the direction at our last meeting was for me to talk with the superintendent at J.L. Combs about why we're in this same spot again. And so I reached out to the superintendent at J.L. Combs, and I have to admit, I went in with a little bit of a bias perspective because I believe that they had growth opportunity and that they were a growing district. In the conversation with him, he said just the opposite, that they're actually down in enrollment, that they had built their budget on a flat growth and they're actually down several hundred students. There's different reasons for that, and it's not my business to get into it as to why that might be the case. He said that they do understand the need to have transportation. They're just not in a position to do it this year. And his commitment was to get a white fleet, meaning a bus, a large van, to transport in the AM, which is a smaller number, then have the bus available in the PM like they currently do for next school year. He also said that they're in a situation where they're down 12 bus drivers. And I said to him, well, you can increase the salary. And he said, well, the hard part about that is that everybody's down bus drivers. And the hard part about that is that, at some point, if people don't want to drive the bus, they don't want to drive the bus. So it was an honest conversation, a conversation that I believe was one that it was rooted in my misunderstanding and that they had dollars because of growth, which isn't the case. And at least the awareness and recognition by J.L. Combs that it's important that the students have AM transportation availability. Whether it happens this year or next year is up to the board's discretion. I think the challenge with it is even if the board says they grant it for this semester, but you expect it second semester, the likelihood of a student starting an AM program second semester isn't high. So even if you wanted to do that, I don't know that necessarily there would be the large need for the transportation second semester in the AM, simply because I don't know that students would take the AM class if they're already scheduled in the PM and their master schedule at their home school has their classes built so that they can take the PM classes here, or PM classes, PM here and AM classes there.
Do we have any idea of how many students this affects?
So no, and the reason for that is because they don't have any students coming in the morning. I mean, they have several students that are coming, but they're already providing their own transportation. So the question would have been how many students would have come in the AM versus the PM, and we haven't had the opportunity to pull those J.L. Combs students.
So I think actually even a better question than that is how many students needed to come in AM, couldn't come in AM, can't come in PM, and therefore are not
Missed
coming?
out, correct.
And there's no way we could pull that data? There's no data yet?
No, it would be a J.L. Combs data pull.
Okay. Because I understand that ideally we would be able to provide an option to every student, AM or PM. But sometimes ideals can't be met. And so it makes sense to me that if a student is able to come in the PM anyway, then that student is still being served. So my biggest concern would be for students that just can't come at
Correct.
all now because they can't provide transportation for themselves and it's not available in the AM.
Correct.
But we have no idea.
I would have to go to J.O. Combs and ask them what students applied for AM EVIT were denied because no transportation that could not fit it in their PM, and so therefore didn't take it. And that would honestly probably focus on athletes, truthfully, more than any.
How many J.O. Combs students do we have?
I'd have to poll. I don't,
We don't have a ballpark
No.
or anything?
I don't. I mean, I can get it for you the next meeting. I think the challenge to your point, Ms. Luke, is that not only the issue that you just said, I think one of the challenges we have, and that's why I think the board is smart in having the AM transportation, is that we look at our PM classes, and we have PM classes that are 48, where the same section in the AM might be 25. Well, if it would work with the student's master schedule, but the district isn't having them come in the AM, and this just isn't a transportation issue, because there's oftentimes students that I believe are still put in a spot where they have to go to PM because the district's saying you can't go in the AM, not transportation, but you can't go in the AM largely because they want the 4 hours. And so in there, that becomes part of the dilemma, right? If we have a class of 48 in the PM and a class of 23 in the AM, but we could have pulled 10 of those kids from the PM to the AM, then we would have had much more balance, much better opportunity for individualized instruction, one-on-one time with the instructor. So yes, I think the issue isn't just those students that didn't attend, but it's also bubbles into problems in the PM just because of overcrowding in the PM. And I think at some point in time, this is again part of the conversation that we started, at some point in time, the question about how you all are going to want to navigate that becomes kind of an important question, right? Because this has been something that's happened in the organization since I was a principal, and that's a long time ago. And it's either looking at ways to incentivize, to draw the line in the sand, whatever the case is for the AM, or do we also begin looking at opportunities to have a third section available in the afternoons after the PM for students that potentially can't come in the AM, for whatever reason can't do the PM, but oftentimes maybe could do a night class. And when we start talking about the one EVIT and we start expanding our opportunities, this place needs to be open and utilized much bigger and more than it currently is. So that's possibly an opportunity as well. So the athlete potentially that doesn't go AM, doesn't go PM, has practice, but we don't have our session start till whatever. Is that a possibility or an option too?
Are there any other schools in this predicament or any other districts, any districts in this predicament that J.O. Combs is in, or is this only?
This particular situation is exclusive to J.O. Combs. I will tell you that the issue of the willingness to send students in the AM versus the PM is across the district. But the transportation issue here is specifically J.O. Combs.
Is there a possibility they could partner with like Queen Creek or some proximate district to say, well, I'll get the mornings and you can get the
Possibly.
afternoons? Because they're not geographically that far apart. Queen
No.
Creek High School and J.O. Combs aren't that far apart.
No, and if they go up Ironwood, they're not that far from AJ either. And so, and like I said, the superintendent of J.O. Combs, I think, is very willing to look for solutions to the issues that exist. I think sometimes superintendents aren't quite aware of the total situation until there's a conversation. I think he was very receptive. I don't believe that he is in a position this year to solve it. I do think he's in a position to look for a solution for next year.
Okay, I would like to maybe amend our motion, because he's done this 3 years in a row, if I remember right. And last year, we were going, well, he can solve it for this year, and he didn't. I would like to amend the motion that this would be the last time he can, will amend it or approve it for this year, but amend it, you need to find a solution for next year in the motion.
I'll take back my motion. I don't know.
No, you just amend your motion.
That's already in the.
Okay. So, because you're welcome to make the motion if you know what you want it to say. I just don't know.
Okay, then I'll do it this way. I would like to approve it, the satellite program, J.L. Combs coming out here, not having buses in the morning, but I would like for him to come up with a solution for next year, not fiscal year, school year. And hopefully come up with a solution by next year. That's sound okay or whatever?
You would have to attach teeth or something,
Well, we
right?
have,
You could-
we're
that's-
under an
if we-
IGA
I don't know.
too. Is
Yeah, part of their
is that
IGA,
work, Kevin?
they're gonna work on it this year.
Well, they would have to apply for the waiver again next year.
And-
So next year you can just vote it down.
We'll vote it down, but, okay, we have to remember this.
You can,
I don't think it would
I don't know
need,
that we could go there and say you can't file for a waiver.
I just say they need to try and find a solution for next year.
Why don't we just stay in communication with them and see where they're at?
We're giving them 12 months to work on a solution.
I also really would be curious to know how many students this actually affects. Because where every student, even one student is too many to deny an opportunity to. But there is a very big difference operationally between one student and 500 students. And if it's one student, there could be many other options available versus 500 students.
Correct.
So if there's a way to kind of massage that a little bit and get a little more information on that, because we certainly want to be compassionate, you know, in what this district's needs are. But as you've been saying all night, our biggest responsibility is to students and what students' needs are.
So I can work with the superintendent at J.L. Combs to try to get a sense from their counseling department how many students wanted the AM, couldn't fit the PM, so therefore they were out of the EVIT opportunity, and I can report that back to you. I also think that there's a part that is not necessarily for tonight's discussion, but a longer discussion around, so if you say no, what does that mean?
What's your teeth?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
truthfully. And I'm not saying that the teeth needs to be,
Dr. Wilson, I think we need a second on the motion before we.
no, Ms. Luke's motion was seconded. You proposed an amendment to her motion, which
Yeah.
was not seconded. So what's on the table right now is Ms. Luke's original motion to approve it.
Okay.
Okay.
So if we're okay keeping the original motion, I don't know that we can attach parameters to a motion of approval, right? We can send a message with
We
it,
can
though.
suggest that they work on a problem for next year. Not demand it, but suggest.
Right, and let them know the trend of this board, but there's gonna, you know, there could be other mitigating circumstances between this year and next year as well, so.
true.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Wilson mentioned the issue about the ADM, and I have to tell you, I'm one of those people that it's been explained to me many times how ADM works, and I always get confused. But I do know that it's been identified as kind of as a possible problem. This thing, I wonder if there's some sort of a fix that we can ask our lobbyists to be thinking about, either legislatively or through departmental regs that might resolve that problem to the extent that the ADM issue is skewing their encouragement of students to come in the PM rather than the AM.
Well, I don't think ADM, that was more a discussion with the students that had out-of-boundary declines
okay,
on enrollment,
right.
not this issue. I don't think ADM is involved in this particular issue.
It's
Okay.
not, other than, I think J.L. Combs had built their budget expecting a certain amount of students that carried with them a certain amount of dollars, and they don't have that amount of students in attendance, which means their budget isn't as robust as they thought it would be. Having said that, I think our lobbyists and others did a really nice job this past session getting more dollars infused into the system based on this year's enrollment, not last year's enrollment, but this year's enrollment. So in that, I think there is, to Mr. Covington's point, the ability to say, look, there's been infusion of dollars that have come through, that came through this last legislative session, that should certainly warrant the ability to have a white fleet, a van, that would, if that's to Ms. Luke's point, if we're talking about 15 students that can run the 15 students here and satisfy the requirement. You know, the bigger question is if we can get more in the AM than the PM, that's good for everybody, but that isn't the topic that we're having today.
Mr. Chairman, in addition, Dr. Wilson, I'm comfortable with you conveying, by the way, I assume you will, to the superintendent for J.L. Combs that the EVIT board is really concerned about access, about kids and access to our programs, and that their bus waiver problem is an issue that that has concerned us because we're wondering how that's affecting kids' access to our program. So I'm happy, you know, I think we will have accomplished our purpose to the extent that you can convey a sense of the board's concern.
Dr. Wilson, did you have the sense when you spoke with the superintendent that he's on top of this for next year?
I got a sense that he understood the situation and agreed with it and is going to look for solutions. To somebody else's point, I mean, what that conversation is in August may look very different in January, depending on what happens between now and January. But as the conversation in August, I did get a sense that he understood the situation and does understand what's expected in the IGA, and will look for a solution that may not be requiring the purchasing of a gigantic bus. I mean, I think there is a sense from him that's a real need and a real possibility. Yes.
And so you feel like that is we're just with that alone, we might be in a different place now than we were a few years ago.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think you honestly, and I know that this is J.L. Combs, but I mean, the J.L. Combs has had the waiver not just for 3 years, but for probably running 8 years. And I think this is the first time in terms of the conversation that there really was a sense that, you know what, this is about, okay, we get it. We can't be the outlier in the whole of the CTED.
Okay.
Today.
So they've signaled, there's a signal that it's different
this
now.
year than in years past, correct.
Okay, I think that's what Mr. Covington was looking for. Am I correct, Mr. Covington?
Yeah, I'm looking for, yes. True. Dr. Wilson, I appreciate you seeing him. I would appreciate a letter maybe from you, letting him know that we are concerned that he needs to work on this. Just maybe I should do that at a different time in the meeting, I guess.
Well, I think there's a piece, I'd be happy to do anything that y'all want me to do. I think there's a piece I heard Ms. Boggs say, though, that I think there's a line there, right? I think our advocacy for students matters more than anything, but the advocacy for students should not create what potentially is viewed as an adversarial relationship. And so, maybe the check-in where, I know the superintendent, I can check in with him periodically and see how it's going. And if there doesn't seem to be traction or movement at some point in time, then we have a very different approach towards making sure that there's assurances this time next year that we're not having the same conversation again, versus a letter right out of the gate that may present itself as being somewhat less user-friendly than ultimately we might want it to be.
Dr. Wilson, are there any other districts that have decreased their students coming to EVIT? Any of them? Less sending students, sending districts?
So J.L. Combs hasn't necessarily decreased the number of students. I know you're not saying this, but I just want to make
Right.
The number of students coming to EVIT. I think every single year there's an ebb and a flow of students. I mean, I think as Mr. Casaro said, and I'll be honest with you, I want to make sure that there's certainty in the numbers. But having said that, when you look at the number of students that we're reporting last year and that we're reporting now, in theory, we have a growth. I'm not sure that that's the case. We're going to know in the next couple of days. But in theory, we're having growth. And so is it growth across the CTED, or is it one district is pushing more than they ever did before? But we're not necessarily seeing a decline of significant numbers from any district across the CTED, more so than what we would in any other year. There's an ebb and a flow every single year.
Do we know if any other districts are declining the way J.O. Combs is?
That's a good question. I don't know that. My guess would tell me that potentially, based on the superintendent's comment, it may be AJ. Maybe, I don't know. I'll talk to the superintendent out there. And the issue was that there was hyper growth that was going that direction and then seemingly has stalled.
Yeah.
And so he's they did a growth analysis and they're not expecting to have to build another elementary school till 2030. Out in J.L. Combs, and that seems soon, but I think 2 years ago they would have thought it was 2028, and so everything got pushed back a little bit in that part of the CTED.
Okay.
Well, they're kind of in a unique position too. They have a lot more competition from particularly the secondary charters out there than any other part in the whole state.
They do.
Half a dozen secondary charters in the Southeast Valley. Including that Pinal area, and that's probably why it's not that their population has changed from the forecast, is that the kids are not going where they anticipated them to go.
Could be.
All right, any further discussion? Mrs. Boggs, will you conduct a vote, please?
Yes. Covington?
Aye.
Lane?
Aye.
McAfee? Luke? Aye. Boggs is an aye, and Hobson.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Next item is 9B, CTED satellite programs at Tempe Union High Schools. I'll entertain a motion in a second.
I'll motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion here?
Abbreviated version.
Yes, I would, Dr. Wilson was talking about how to get other districts on board. I appreciate what Tempe Union High School has done in changing their plans, and I think they did a very nice job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussions or concerns? Mrs. Box, will you conduct a vote, please?
Covington?
Aye.
Lane?
Aye.
McAfee?
Aye.
Luke? Aye. Boggs is an aye, and Hobson.
Aye.
That brings us to 9C, school year 22-23 CTED satellite programs at Mesa Public High Schools.
I make a motion that we approve Mesa Union High School with the addendum that they need to correct a lot of errors that they have in their crossover program. And I will point some amount in a minute.
I'll
I'd like for
second.
them to correct that probably by the 40th day of school.
I'll second.
Mrs. McAfee is seconded. Mr. Covington, proceed.
Okay. Thank you for the second. I've gone through this, and with their master plan that they have here, that they gave us, which was nice, I went through with all the programs and tried to find the exact same name program on here with their teacher. I could figure out that there are different names between here and on this, and in some places, they have some teachers listed that don't have a program that is listed on their school. Or they have a program that is listed that does not have a teacher on their roster. Okay, examples at Dobson Automotive does not have an advisor listed. They have a class called Amazon Web Service or something like that that doesn't have a teacher matching to it. At Mesa and a couple of these other, they have bioscience on one, and their teachers teaching biotechnology, so that needs to be corrected. And let's see, at Mesa High School, graphic and web design, I didn't find a teacher for that. Engineering, there's no program listed with
It's
an
dark.
advisor.
It's dark this year.
It's dark this year? Okay, so.
Dobson Auto's dark this year.
Okay, so that's why I can see that, I mean, why are they asking for funding if it's dark, that they need to be removed? Okay, Mountain, let's see, get some others, I'll pick on all the school. Red Mountain, same thing with BioNetwork. They have a network security, which they don't have it really identified, but I'm sure that their cyber teacher is the one teaching it. Same thing at some of the other teachers. At Skyline, they have architectural drafting. There's no teacher listed for that. And, you know, and at Westwood, they have Air Force ROTC, but no teacher listed.
So I think that I understand what you're saying, and I think that in some cases, we have programs in which it's a reoccurring program,
Yeah,
not a new program, and so the teacher's still to be determined because they're trying to fill the class.
yeah,
And when it's a new program, the recommendation historically has been to not approve it because it's not a proven commodity. But in a reoccurring program, we understand that what is in the requirements matches, with the exception of, so what we've said is, to your point, is that we're gonna monitor whether or not they have a highly qualified teacher that's in there by the 40th day. And Tammy's done an amazing job in years past doing that, to make sure that meets the requirement of the approval. And if it doesn't, which in a case last year with a different district, they didn't, and so they pulled it and we pulled it from the state, so there wasn't the funding. So I absolutely agree with you on the program courses that don't currently yet have staff. That's something that we do, not just in this district, but any district, to be truthful. If it's an existing program, not if it's a new program.
yeah, but if they're asking for a program that's really not, they don't have that program under that teacher, the proper name of it, or whatever it is. So they're cross-referencing. I mean, we're basically, they're asking for money from the state for this. And if we apply for a grant or a loan or something like that, and you fill out misinformation, you don't really get it. So that's where I'm coming from, is I want to make sure that they have the proper verbiage down there and they do it properly so they can get the funding. I'm going to vote for them to get it and correct it by the 40th. Any other comments?
Will 40 days give them a long enough time
Yeah.
to, that's
Yeah,
enough?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and they can't, if they don't have kids
They
in
can't
a
get the funding
program,
for it
they can't
anyway.
charge ADM anyway. That's just,
Yeah.
it's a
I'm looking at-
possibility.
I'm looking at some of these programs, and I think they are phenomenal programs. And I think that they could really be meeting the needs of their students. And I would just hate to see students miss out on some of these, cutting-edge things, like this Amazon Web Services program that they're going to start, things like that. I think that those are really responsive to the times in which we live. And sometimes everything can't just be perfect right out of the gate. So I appreciate what Mr. Covington is saying, but I want to make sure they've got the time
They
to.
have. And yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that they will. I mean, again, we started this conversation a bit earlier about making sure we point the fingers in before we point the fingers out. And I'll tell you that we periodically go through seasons in the beginning of the school year in which we think that we have a person that's going to be hired and they're ready to go. And then 2 weeks before the school year starts, they're not. And so do we not offer the course, or do we look at creative ways to get the course started? We still go find a highly qualified individual to teach the course. And I know that happens not just here, but it happens all across the CTED. And so I think within the 40th day, though, they'll make a decision whether or not they're going to be able to find the qualified replacement. And if they can't, then they'll collapse the program themselves. If they can, then it's a win-win, not only for the student, but for the organization.
Perfect.
Okay, any further discussion? Mrs. Boggs, will you conduct a vote, please?
Yes. Covington?
Aye.
Lane?
Aye.
McAfee?
Aye.
Luke?
Aye.
Boggs is an aye, and Hobson.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay. Item 9D is school year 22-23 CTED satellite programs at Scottsdale Unified High Schools. Need a motion and a second.
I would like to make the same motion I made for Mesa. They have a lot of problems hiring teachers and getting things done. I just would like to make a motion to approve Scottsdale United, because we want their students to be able to have these programs, but just to make sure they notify us and that they've found the teachers, and hopefully a CSO program that fits that one by the 40th day.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Mrs. Boggs, will you conduct the vote, please?
Covington?
Aye.
Lane?
Aye.
McAfee?
Aye.
Luke?
Aye.
Boggs is an aye, and Hobson.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 9E, EVIT ALA Applied Technologies Satellite Campus.
I would mind combining E and F, because I think they're the same thing, but, to approve them,
That's
And-
acceptable.
understand from Mr. Wilson what it's all about.
I'll second.
So for.
Dr. Wilson, excuse me.
That's for items 9E and 9F together. We
Yes.
have a motion and a second. Any discussions? Hearing none, let's.
Well, I want,
Yeah.
I'd like to hear from
Oh,
Dr.
you
Wilson.
want
So,
to say
Mr.
something?
President, members of the governing board, we were fortunate enough to have both ALA and Heritage Academy join our CTED. You voted and approved them to join the CTED a couple meetings ago. The next step in that is then you approving their CTDS number. The state of Arizona requires an action item for you to do that in order for them to get the number that they can then use to upload their students to the state and collect ADM. So all you're doing is what we've done previously, but it's as an action item for the CTDS number so they can upload and collect ADM for the students on their campus as satellite programs. We've done this for every single CTED every single district that has joined our CTED.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or concerns? Mrs. Boggs, will you conduct the vote,
You know, I
please?
actually have a question. How many other charters are involved with EVIT.
Great question.
In this manner.
Yep, these are the first two. So we have a lot of charter schools, a lot of charter students that attend our programs, but historically, we've not had an MOU with a charter. And so we talked with both ALA and Heritage to have them see if they'd be interested in joining the CTED and offering satellite classes on their campuses, and they were agreeable to do that. So these are the first two that we have. We have other charters that participate, but not with an MOU like this.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Mrs. Boggs?
Covington?
Aye.
Lane?
Aye.
McAfee?
Aye.
Luke?
Aye.
Boggs is an aye, and Hobson.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay. We have an item for executive session for the board self-evaluation. However, we're short a couple of key board members, and I believe it would be appropriate to move this to our next meeting. I'll move us to item 11 as action item, which will be tied to this meeting, and we'll also be moving that to the meeting where we have the executive session. Brings us to item 12, staff reports. Dr. Wilson?
Mr. President, members of the governing board, it seems like this has been the Dr. Wilson show tonight, and I apologize so seriously
that way
for that.
sometimes.
It does. I just don't like it, though. So a couple of brief updates. One, I know that there have been several who have asked about a security update in the organization, given the fact that we live in the times that we live in. We're currently working through that, and but we're not yet ready to come to you with that. So I plan to bring that to you in the next couple of meetings, where we're at with our security, so that you guys understand where we're at and feel comfortable with it and can help us do better as we move forward. Just so you know, the start of the school year is always an interesting time. There's some things that went really, really well. There's some things we got to get ironed out, and I think that happens in every organization. One of the things that I am so impressed, though, about in this organization is that when you walk on our campus and you see students and you say hi to them, you ask them how their day is going. I haven't come across one yet that didn't smile and say the day is great. Now, if that doesn't happen always on high school campuses. And for it to happen, I think, is a wonderful experience as an educator. The thing I hope is if 6 weeks from now I go up to that same student, I say, how's your day going? And he or she's not smiling again, then that's something we did. Because the first 2 weeks, they're excited to be here. And that's a really wonderful feeling. I think that you will be impressed as we unpack over the next couple of weeks what Mrs. Doolin is doing on our curriculum side, some of the Herculean tasks that we have in front of us, and some of the challenges that we're working our way through. On the operational side, when you hear from Mr. Casaro, Mr. Fisher, and you hear about, not only the opening of the Power Campus with the 2 new buildings, but the conversations that we have with Chase as we begin doing our remodel here, I think is exciting for you. I think will be exciting for you. I think we're in a really unique time as an organization, and I look forward over the next couple of months to bring to you what we're doing on the curriculum, the operational, as well as kind of the long-term plan for who we are today, but not only that, who we expect ourselves to be in the future. So thank you for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to future conversations by folks other than myself. That's all I have, sir.
Thank you. So our calendaring, our next board meeting is calendared for August 22 at 6 p.m. with a dinner at 5 p.m. If anyone has items that we want to get on the agenda, contact myself or Dr. Wilson at least a week prior to that date. And if there's nothing further, we'll move to item 13B, and we'll just do that with a good old-fashioned yay or nay. All in favor?
Yay.
Aye.
Yay,
Aye,
aye,
yay,
yay, nay.
Yay.
You know.
We, sure, yeah.
And we are concluding.